What's up, guys? My name's Captain Dave, and welcome to what I'm sure we can go ahead and call Captain Dave's thoughts on Mass Effect, because as of recording this, right at this very moment, I have just made public the very last episode in the walkthrough of Mass Effect. So I thought now would be a good time, I suppose, to talk and get my thoughts and feelings on what I feel about Mass Effect as a whole. And when I'm saying Mass Effect, I'm talking about obviously Mass Effect 1. I just don't like calling it Mass Effect 1, because as far as I'm concerned, you've got Mass Effect 2, and Mass Effect 3. It's not called Mass Effect 1. It's never had a 1 placed after it. It's just called Mass Effect. I can see where there's confusion, but what can I say? I'm picky about stuff like that. But anyway, I wanted to go in a little bit in depth and talk about sort of why it is one of my favourite games, because for those who don't know, the Mass Effect trilogy is my favourite game, and it's a bit funky to say that 3 games are your favourite game. If I had to narrow it down, I'd probably say Mass Effect 2 is my favourite, but they're all good within their own right. You can compare, I guess, Mass Effect 2 and 3 together, but I feel Mass Effect 1 is kind of a standalone game on its own. That's something I'll touch on a little bit later, I guess. But if I had to pick, I'd say Mass Effect 2, but I say the Mass Effect trilogy is my favourite game, because it is literally all one story comprised of 3 smaller stories. So I say that Mass Effect as a trilogy is my favourite game, and for any of you who have been a subscriber of mine for any length of time knows that that is quite a big statement for me, because I can never pick my favourite thing of anything ever. Favourite song, favourite film, favourite up until this point game. I can never pick my favourite. It's one month I'm loving one thing, and it's next month I'm loving something else. I can never ever pick. I mean, as I'm getting older, I'm finding stuff I tend to prefer, but I can never pick a favourite, because as time goes on, your moods change, and at one point you might be loving this, and tomorrow you're loving this. It completely changes. But as of right now, I've been playing Mass Effect for coming near to just to the end of 7 months, nearly 8 months. I've been playing this game solidly with no other games in between, other than obviously recording Arkham City. But I've been playing this game solidly, recording and in my spare time. I honestly can't get enough of it, and the fact that I think that just proves that something's your favourite when that is all you want to play. And I have other games sitting there that I haven't even touched and haven't even opened, and I've got no interest in playing them, because Mass Effect is all I want to play right now. So I think that goes to prove why it's my favourite. But anyway, enough of that. I've spent about just under 3 minutes just gassing as to get across the point that it's my favourite. And what it is, as you all know, I tend to go off on a bit of a tangent, as I did just then. So what I've done is I've written down a few things, I've wrote, whatever the correct term is for it. I've written down a few things just to sort of keep my mind on focus, so I don't go off on too big a tangent and make this too long a video. But anyway, one of the first things I think in my mind I wanted to talk about, and one of the first things that gripped me to the game as a series, I think is the sheer amount of depth that there is to the game in so many ways. One of which, of course, being the major one, being the storyline of the game. It's the fact that when you first go into this game, when you first go in and you just see that start menu and you're hearing what eventually is called the Ilos theme right at the very start of the game, and then you go on and you're playing all the game, you go in and you know nothing, other than obviously the stuff you know at the time. You don't know anything about the game, presumably, unless you've already watched walkthroughs or such like that. But at the time of being released, you knew nothing. As you're going out through the game, you are learning so much about the characters and so much sort of in-depth stuff about them through many different ways. I mean, through the backstory of Shepard, just right off the bat, you're creating a backstory for Shepard about, was he a sole survivor, was he ruthless, was he a hero, what is his character like, where did he come from, was he Earthborn, was he a spacer, was he a colonist. You're already creating this rich background for Shepard, your main character, before anything has even happened. At this point, all you've seen is some text on the screen on the back of Shepard's head. That is all you've seen, and you're already creating this rich and depth story behind him to give yourself some purpose. So you're thinking, right, that is who I am, that is who my character is, and you've already got a mentality set out for him, which I think is the perfect way to kick off the series. Because as it goes on, as you know, there are choices that you need to make in every single situation you get to, which some have major ramifications, some don't have ramifications past 5 minutes in the future. But every choice you make has some sort of effect, even if it's just gaining Paragon or Renegade points. And I think that backstory that you get right at the very start about Shepard, defining who he is, helps you make those choices as the game goes on. Because if you're a sole survivor, or you're ruthless, and you came off the mean streets of the Earth and something like that, and then you're going around going, no, I'll help you, it wouldn't make quite sense. But you're thinking that in the back of your mind, it's constantly there. And you think to yourself, no, I'm ruthless. I don't care if this person, it feels good. I don't care if this person has their family's armor. Rex, talking to you, buddy. It's just, I think it helps drive the story with that notion of who Shepard is in the back of your head. Just keeps the thing going on, and that reigns true throughout the entire game. One of which, the sort of the depth to the story, being the conversations you have. I mean, in my walkthrough alone, I was on the Presidium in the Citadel, I think for over 10 episodes, each episode being 20 to 30 minutes long. Now if you think about how much time that actually is, just spent in one area of the game, not killing anything, all of that was spent conversations. I mean, barring parts like Cora's Den, or with Fist, or where we first met Tally in the the alleyway and stuff, when we got the Shadow Broker set, Fist sort of set her up against the Shadow Broker and trade her into Saren and all that sort of jazz. Other than like minor scenes like that, we have a bit of combat. The whole time it was conversations, and a lot of people, I feel, find that as almost like a gripe. That's something they complain about quite a lot. They say, oh, it's so boring, it's so slow, I just want to get the action, and you're just sitting there talking to people. But if you don't want to sit there and talk to people, and I think, to be honest, that's just more about sort of the way people are growing up towards games now. I mean, when the game first came out, it was more centered around people who are used to these long RPG style games, where you buy a game and you're playing it for a couple of months and you're doing everything. Nowadays, people pick up games, and it's because ever since you're a tiny child, and it's not your fault, but ever since people grow up now, they're used to games where it's just quick action, quick, the next scene, the next scene, the next bit of violence, the next action, the next bit of CGI in your face, constantly flashing images, loads of talking, trying to keep you pumped in the game. And because, say, older people come from a generation where games didn't have that visual effect, they didn't have that draw, it was all based on dialogue and sort of little things that just keep you hooked on the game. It's not, I'm trying to make a sweeping statement. There could be people born today, there could be people born 10 years ago, there could be people that are born 20 years ago, who all have that same mentality, who all love RPGs and they love getting sucked in. There could be people who are 30, 40-year-old who need that flashing images and that progression of the story really quick, and they hate RPGs. I know there are exceptions to the rule, but I guess, there I am going off on a bit of a tangent again, but what I'm trying to get at, I guess, is the fact that these conversations that take so long, it's part of the game, and if you don't like running around doing these conversations, you are going to miss so much of the game. And when you go off to these missions and you're doing stuff, they're going to make sense, but you're not going to have that same emotional pull that you had to them, because you haven't gone around the Presidium, and you haven't helped, what's his name, something Buttier, or whatever his name was, Samira Buttier, I think that was his name, something like that. You haven't helped him get his wife's body back, and you haven't helped the dispute about whether to keep the child because of genetic flaws, and you haven't helped with loads of other, like the Elcor diplomat and the Turian that's in the bar, and you haven't helped all these people with their problems. All of that stuff that comes back up in Mass Effect 2 and 3, if you help them, you do meet them again, at least most of them. They are all ramifications that do happen like later on in the game. But without that depth to the story, without that feeling that you've actually gone around there and you've actually done and you helped something, it doesn't bring that emotional pull. And to be honest, I feel by lengthening the game, by doing all that and spending all that amount of time, when you do actually eventually get to the main missions and you reveal a major part to the story or a major twist, or you finally get to Ilos and the Citadel and you kick Aaron right at Aaron? Who the hell is Aaron? You kick Aaron and you kick Saren right in their butt, and you blow up Sovereign, it makes it feel that much more dramatic and that much more impressive. You think, I have been at this for some time, 40, 50 hours I've been playing this game, going around helping everyone in the galaxy. You finally beat them, you finally stop them, and you think to yourself, yes, I did that. And all the characters are saying, oh, we finally get them, we finally get them, we finally stop them. And you're sitting there right along with them thinking, yeah, we've finally got there. Whereas if you've rushed the game and you've skipped all those conversations, you get there and you're thinking, yeah, I killed him, but so what? And it's because you haven't had that same journey that you're supposed to have in the game by talking to all these people and doing all these side missions and such like that, although I know some of the side missions can be a bit tedious, but yeah, that's something else I want to talk about later. But yeah, I feel like the conversations you have, not just with random people, but with your crewmates especially. If you don't go around, and I know Mass Effect 1, there isn't as many crew conversations as they say in Mass Effect 2 or 3, they increase the dialogue just exponentially. It's crazy the amount they increase it, and it's for the best. But I feel that in Mass Effect 1, even if you don't have conversations with your crew, it sounds silly knowing obviously they're just voice actors and sort of like 3D models and stuff like that, but you don't get to know your crewmates and you don't get to know the characters that you're going on these missions with. You don't care about their stories, and in a way you don't care who you bring with you. And if you don't care who you bring with you, you're missing out on the fundamental parts of the game. It's not Shepard going around doing all this, it's Shepard and his crew. And if you don't have these conversations, you don't build up that relationship, and you're cutting out a major point of the game. And it's reasons like that I feel people may not like the game, because they haven't gone ahead and actually experienced the game for what it is. It's like playing football and thinking, well, I don't get to pick up and throw anything. Well, that's not what the game's about. The game is about the conversations and the relationships and the journey that you take together with these characters. And if that's not what you want and you're not doing that, then you're not getting the full experience of the game. But with that being said, one of the other things that I thought just helped add to the depth, and people say they don't like, say like for example Mass Effect 3 is the main draw to this. A lot of people bitch and whinge about that, and I think they're just jumping on the bandwagon. If you're to be honest, on the bandwagon, if I'm being honest, I think the game is actually a good game, and I think a lot of people saw some of their big YouTube commentators say it was a bad game, and they jumped on the bandwagon. And of course, I'm a bit of a fanboy, I'm not going to lie, so obviously I'm going to think that, but I think a lot of people just heard people say it was bad, so then they say it's bad too, and they fail to look at the good points. But one of the things that has always impressed me throughout Mass Effect 1, 2, and through 3 is the continuity is outstanding. I think some TV shows could learn from the continuity in Mass Effect. The fact that you could have one tiny conversation with somebody in Mass Effect 1, a complete random side character, and you happen to have one of your squad mates with you. Say, for example, Tally is standing next to you as you're having this conversation with someone. In Mass Effect 2 or Mass Effect 3, you could just happen to bump into that person again, or somebody could ask you to do something, and Tally will say, yeah, it was like that guy in Mass Effect 1. And even though it's all like strips of code and it's all sort of just memory that's passed on and events get memorized and then flagged up at certain points of the game, I know it's just that, but that's stuff they didn't have to build in the game. That if that wasn't there, nobody would care, but yet they spend the time and the effort to put stuff like that in the game. So it feels like all this time you've invested into your characters and into the story as a whole, you get a payoff, because later on you bump into that person and they're not pretending like they've never met before. If you haven't met them before, then they act normal, but if you have met them before, the game actually recognises that you've met them. And I think the continuity and stuff like that, little side jokes characters have, like obviously it's a bit of a spoiler for Mass Effect 2, but there's a joke constantly about a certain squad mate calibrating a certain object. And I don't want to give anything away, because there are some people who still haven't played it and they're waiting for me to do the walkthrough, so I don't want to give anything away. But yeah, and it's jokes like that then carry through to Mass Effect 3, and it's the continuity of stuff like that is just, I think without it, the game would survive, the game would be fine, but the fact they do that, it just emphasises everything and makes it almost, not realistic, but, well, yeah, realistic, to be honest with you. In real life, if you meet someone 10 years later, you bump into them, you still remember those little jokes and those little things, an event that happened a little while ago, and they didn't have to add it in, but they did, and I think it just increases the effect of the game amazingly. And as I say, you go through all of that story, everything that you've just done, and you get to the very end credits, and I think the choice of Thorn's M4 Part 2 music that they have right at the very end was the perfect style of music. Not only is it almost kind of emotional and thought-provoking, but it's the same sort of techno vibe that the rest of the game has. It still has a bit of an emotional pull, which I thought was really sort of an amazing piece of music from at least in England where I'm from, an unheard of band. I don't know how popular they are in other countries, say like Australia or America or whatnot. But yeah, I think you hear that piece of music, and quite often in games that maybe are a bit more fast-paced, a bit more action, that end a bit quicker, you get to the end of the game and the credits hit, and you think, oh, okay, well, I wanted to play that for a bit longer, but oh well, and you move on. You go play another game, or you might start it again. It's up to you. That music hits at the end of Mass Effect, and at least drawing from my own personal experience, I sat there in silence, like stunned silence. Not sounds a bit sad, like, oh my god, but no, I sat there and I was just almost in awe. I was sitting there, and as that music like kicked in, I was almost thrown into a bit of nostalgia, and I was just thinking about everything that had happened ever since that ILO's music hit at the very start of the title screen, at the very start of the game, all the way through the game to the end bit, everything that's happened with Saren, Sovereign, the Geth, your crewmates, you know, losing one of your squad mates on Vermeer, and everything that's happened, from everyone you've talked to, all the battles, all the combat, everything that's happened to that point, I just thought, I sat there and just thought about it all. And before you start the game, as I said earlier, you know nothing. And then towards the end of that, you know this rich, diverse culture that doesn't even exist. Yet you know everything about it. About the humans, the Turians, the Solarians, the Quarians, the Krogans, the Drell. That one, I suppose the Drell aren't in Mass Effect 1, sorry. The Hanar, the Krogan. I'm forgetting people that I think I've already said. The Volus, the Elcor, the Protheans, the Geth, the Reapers. You know, there's so many. I'm sure I forgot some. Now you know all these rich, diverse cultures, especially if you've read all the codex as well. You're knowing about all these life forms that don't even exist, but you feel like you've known them just as long as you know cats, dogs, and monkeys, you know? And I think it's amazing that one game can create this entire other world, and not only have they created this world, but it's almost a believable world. And it's just, I think the depth they put into it, they didn't have to, but they did, and I think that's one of the things that makes Mass Effect 1 and the rest of the series to stand out amongst everything else. Something else I thought that made Mass Effect, as I say, I tend to say Mass Effect 1 is a kind of a prelude to the trilogy, mainly because the gameplay was so different from Mass Effect 2 and 3, and I think that's probably due to the success of Mass Effect 1. They were able to listen to user comments and rehaul the whole thing, probably with a budget increase, I'm going to go ahead and assume, after the success of Mass Effect 1. But obviously the game itself plays so different. A lot of the things there's a less of it than there is in Mass Effect 2 and 3. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but it makes you feel like you're almost playing a different game. A few people said to me, how can I go from completing the trilogy, Mass Effect 3, and then go back to 1 and start recording my walkthrough? And I said to them, it's like playing Mass Effect 1 is like playing a different game. I found it a lot harder going from Mass Effect 3 to go to Mass Effect 2 than I did going from Mass Effect 3 to Mass Effect 1. Because the gameplay is like you're playing a separate game. The story is all intact, but the actual gameplay is like you're playing a completely separate game. And I just thought, even though it's completely different, there were a few things they needed to tweak, and in the rest of the trilogy they tweaked it, that being stuff like the sprint they needed to improve on, the fact you couldn't do it unless you're in combat. Although someone told me if you throw a grenade, then you can, that almost triggers a combat, so you can sprint for that point, but you'd have to have like an infinite amount of grenades to be able to do that throughout the entire mission. But anything they needed to improve on, stuff like the sprint, they did. And I think one of the other things I thought maybe they could improve on was a bit more sort of a bit more depth when it came to the characters. And as I said, they did that. Mass Effect 2 and 3, the amount you can talk to your squad mate and get to know them, stuff like that is just amazing. One thing that I felt they really needed to improve on though in Mass Effect 1 was the side missions. The sheer amount of side missions that you do, rocking around in the goddamn Mako, just searching for minerals and stuff like that, and like dog tags and, you know, matriarch writings and stuff like that. And then when you'd actually finally get to a base that you needed to destroy, there were literally like 3 stock bases that the game used, and then they were just used on repeat over and over again, except for one might have Geth in it, one might have, I don't know, Blood Pack in it, one might have some sort of mercenary gang or a Asari or Biotics and whatever, but they were the same bases over and over again. And I think that was something they really could have improved on, because quite often in these bases, throughout Mass Effect 1, you could talk to your squad mates, you just sort of click on them, and depending where you are, they'd have something they'd respond to you back with. In side missions, they didn't have any dialogue unless it was at the end of the side mission. And quite often they would just say, oh yeah, following you, Shepard, behind you, Shepard. It'd be the same thing. There was no... The great story that made Mass Effect was completely void in the side missions, and I think they made them really repetitive and really boring, and you really had to grind to try and get them all done. And I think that's something they've improved upon in Mass Effect 2. The side missions... The squad don't necessarily talk as much, but there is more of a main mission feel to the side missions. And then again in 3, they increased it even more by making less exploration, like in the Mako, and then making it more about the actual mission itself, which I suppose some people think is a bad thing, because you're taking away the exploration part of an RPG, but at the same time it kind of sped it along without detracting from the story. So I think it was kind of weighing the good and the bad, and I think they hit a nice balance roundabout. Somewhere in between Mass Effect 2 and 3, I think would be a nice little balance for it. Maybe 3, they sped it up a bit too much. I'm not certain, but I think with all that in mind, it's a great game, but a great game is sort of reaches its end once you get to the end of it. And I think one of the good things is about Mass Effect, there is so much replayability to it in all 3 games. Especially if you replay the entire trilogy from Mass Effect 1, the replayability options is just... It's just incredible. The fact that you've got all your different classes you can choose. You can choose between like Vanguard, Soldier, Sentinel, Adept. There's plenty others as well that I'm forgetting, like a Tech and stuff like that. So many different classes you can choose through, which means you have a different play style for all three of the games. I mean, now I know every time you start a new game, you can choose the new class again, so I'm aware of that. But I think the fact that you have different classes and stuff like that just means you have a new playstyle. So say you've explored every single possible story that you can, which I'd be impressed if you did, and then you can start it all again, but this time your playstyle will be different. So whereas before you might have sat back as a soldier and sniped everyone, this time you might be an adept or a vanguard and you're getting right up in their face with a shotgun, doing, I suppose in Mass Effect 2, the vanguard charge, but in other games, you might just be running in like a vanguard with a pistol and a shotgun and getting really in their face, whereas before you sat back and sniped or threw biotics or tech skill or something like that, and it completely changes up your gameplay, and I think it lets you go through the game again, experiencing it in a whole different way. Missions you found easy before because you'd sit back and you'd charge in and kill them all, you might find a lot harder when you're getting surrounded by husks and you're more of a long range person, and now they're coming at you and they're all around you. It adds a new level of difficulty. It forces you to play the same game in a completely different way. But not just that, as I touched on earlier before, there's like the history, there's the choice, there's all the history and the backstory to Shepards and stuff like that. That I think you can do. It won't change the game a lot, but there are some side missions you can only do depending on what his history is and what his personality type is. And people respond to you differently. Say like they're talking about biotics. If you're a soldier, they'll just talk to you. But if you're a vanguard or an adept, they'll talk to you and say, much like yourself, Shepard. And it's just little things like that. Now, it kind of goes along with the continuity as well. I just think they didn't need to add in, but they do. And I think it adds a sense of replayability to it. Not to mention the choices and the consequences. The whole game is full of choices. And as I mentioned with the continuity, every single one of those choices, whether it affects you 5 minutes from now or at the end of Mass Effect 3, every single choice you make has a consequence to it, and that I think goes hand in hand with the Paragon and Renegade options. You got an option, and you can either answer it one nice way, one bad way, or if you have a high enough Paragon or Renegade score, you can answer it in a very nice Paragon hero-y sort of way, or in a ruthless, aggressive, I just need to get the job done kind of way. And as a result, that creates your character into something completely different. You respond different, and you get different responses back from the characters by acting either positively or negatively. So it literally means you can play the game once as Paragon, play the exact same character, exact same class, but now choose Renegade options, and you've got two different stories. I mean, the main story is the same, but the way everyone reacts to you and the way your crew treat you could be completely different because of how you've said that. And I think that's just something that is just amazing, because quite often you can play games in a different way, but the actual game itself is going to react the same. And in Mass Effect, if you choose different things, the game reacts to how you've chosen it, which basically means you can almost forge yourself a new game, barring, of course, the main story. But yes, talking about your consequences and the sort of the choices you make and stuff like that. Obviously, you've got the romances, which is a big point, a big like selling point, a drawing point in Mass Effect. Mass Effect 1, it wasn't too big. I think it was something they added in because they thought it'd be a nice touch. And there's something like the fact that if you're male Shepard, you have a choice between Liara and Ashley. And if you're female Shepard, you have a choice between Liara and Kaidan instead. And obviously, I think they give you two choices. I'm not sure it's whether because they're focusing a lot on choices or because they want you to choose. But also, say you're male Shepard and you kill Ashley on Vermire like I did, you've only got one choice left. So unless you're completely horrible to her, you've still got your backup just in case. But then, say you're Mal Shepard and you kill Kaidan instead, and you've got both Ashley and Liara, and then you've got a choice who you're going to romance. And I think it's one of the choice things they give you, and I think it adds on into the other games as well, because a risk of like spoiling Mass Effect 2 and 3, which I'm going to try and not do in this because this is supposed to be about Mass Effect 1. Obviously, it carries on into the next game, so if you romance Liara or Ashley in Mass Effect 1, or Kaidan if you're female Shepard, in Mass Effect 2, at least that past will still be present. Obviously, I don't want to say anything, so I don't want to tell you if they're in the game, if they're not, what happens, but the fact that you did romance them in Mass Effect 1 is present in Mass Effect 2. And I think that's good, and as the games go on, they add the romance just so much more. If you want, you can try and keep true to like one person, whether you don't romance someone in one of the games just so you can stay faithful to the person in the first game, or whether you flirt around and try and sleep with as many people as possible. Hell, in Mass Effect 3, they even introduced the gay option. So if you're female Shepard, there's a few of the female crewmates you can get with, other than, of course, Liara, because sorry, I'm not multi-gendered, but they bond mentally, if you see what I mean. So you could be male, female, human, you could be a Krogan, you could be a Turian, it doesn't matter. But talking about human squad mates, they add in a few female lesbian scenes, and also for male Shep, there's a few male gay scenes as well. One new crewmate, and also one sort of old crewmate that sort of rekindles a kind of love, I guess. A bromance turns into just a romance, who knew? But yeah, I just think that ties in with everything else I've been talking about. I mean, I've been going on for some time. I had no idea this video was going to be this long. It's crazy. I didn't mean to start talking on this long, but I think that just goes to show how great a game this is. I swear there's stuff I'm forgetting to mention. There is so much stuff that I could go into more depth about, like the voice acting. Oh my god, I haven't even mentioned the voice acting. The fact that voice acting is insane when you realise how they do the voice acting and like who does the voice acting. And then when you find out that different people do the same voices, like Commander Shepard, who's voiced by Mark Meer, who I had the greatest pleasure in getting to meet at Comic-Con. As you know in my channel trailer, that's him right at the very start, giving me the Shepard endorsement, which hands down one of the best moments in my life, which is either a great honour, I guess, to say that to him, or either a sad statement about my life, but one of the two. But yeah, is the fact that he does Commander Shepard, all of Commander Shepard's lines, and if you think about all the Paragon options, all the Renegade options, and then you've got mixed that with different squad mates, if you keep one alive, if you don't keep one alive, and then all the effects that then goes off into Mass Effect 2 and 3, which branches out in more options, he records all that. Not only that, but he does other voices. Apparently he does the majority of the Volus, you know, the sort of characters, the mini Darth Vaders. Most of them are done by Mark Meer, and every single Vulture, well, I suppose saying that I've kind of... They're not really present in Mass Effect 1, but in Mass Effect 2 there's a character called the Vulture, which I'm not really spoiling because they're not really a major part of the game. But yeah, he does every single voice for that, and I think it's amazing when you realise the sheer amount of voice acting one person has to do, and then you find out they voice other characters as well, and you realise the amount of time that's been put into it. And I think that's a nice way to end this little video, to mention the fact that the actual people who made this game, the sheer amount of time and effort they put into this has probably doubled and tripled when it comes to Mass Effect 2 and 3. Well, I say that lightly about 3, because well, there's many parts of that game that have been rushed, and it's a bit of a letdown, unfortunately. But the sheer amount of time and effort that's been put into these games, into this entire trilogy, just to make it a well-rounded sort of, just the continuity in the story and everything, just this in-depth universe. And I think they hit the nail on the head. It was perfect, and to be honest, other than a few small gripes, I mean, everyone can pick holes at anything. There's nothing could ever be perfect. There'll always be one person out there who says, "Oh, I didn't like this," and you messed this bit up over there, and stuff like that. I'm sure there's always someone who's going to hate something, but realistically speaking, they hit the nail on the head, and I don't think there is really any way they can improve this game or this trilogy any further without risking ruining it, because I know many games get ruined by adding too much into it, by trying to make it perfect, and they hit a perfect spot of not too much and not too little. It was just the right amount to get you hooked, and as you can tell by me, I've rambled on for half an hour now, and I could probably talk for longer about how much I like it. So I think that just goes to say that, well, I love the game. I think it's a great game. I'm sure there's going to be others out there who disagree. I'm sure many people will voice their comments, and if they do, I will say, why are you watching the video if you don't like the game? But anyway, I'm going to sign it off there, because I will just keep talking and I won't be able to stop. So personally, my thoughts on Mass Effect 1. Loved Mass Effect 1. I think it's a brilliant game. I think it is a must play for everyone, even if they do kind of want to rush through it a little bit. Everyone has their own play style, but I think it's an amazing game, and yeah, I think if anyone has the opportunity to play it, they shouldn't say no. And I've already, at this point, I'm well over halfway through recording my Mass Effect 2 walkthrough. I mean, I've got about 3 episodes uploaded, waited to go live. Obviously, as I said, as of recording this, the last episode of Mass Effect 1 just went live. So I am well over halfway of recording Mass Effect 2, so you've got plenty of stuff to come, and I cannot wait to upload it because some of it is just gold. It is amazing, and Mass Effect 2 is a great game. But Mass Effect 1, love it, fantastic. I really hope you enjoyed it as much as I loved playing it, because trust me, I really did love playing it. And I'm going to leave you off there. Feel free to let me know what you thought of the game, the walkthrough on Mass Effect in general. And as always, my name's Captain Dave. This has been my thoughts on Mass Effect and my Mass Effect walkthrough, and I will catch you guys later.